Hello and welcome to the Danger Zone, everyone. Today, I want to talk about why Whiterime Ridge should be the next reserve added to the Hunter Call of the Wild. Now, Whiterime Ridge was my favorite reserve from the Hunter Classic. It had this unique atmosphere and species list that always had me coming back, time and time again. I'd go check out the other reserves in the game, but the one that kept calling me back was Whiterime Ridge. This one, it combines a very unique species list with the Call of the Wild's updated graphics and weather system. I think this would create an absolutely incredible experience for a reserve like this. Even if it isn't directly called Whiterime Ridge, I believe a reserve like this would be heavily influenced by that reserve from the Hunter Classic. While we do already have Medved Taiga in the game, which is a similar feel to what I imagine this reserve would be like in the game, I think it could be taken a step further with the improvements that the weather system in the game has seen since Medved Taiga's release. I'm just imagining tracking animals through a frozen tundra or frozen forest, whatever it may be, when all of a sudden a blizzard rolls through, reducing your visibility and just adding that much more challenge to your hunt. Now, Expansive Worlds did release what I would call a short teaser for this upcoming reserve in their winter preview show that happened near the end of 2024. Now, in this little teaser, all we saw was falling snow, snow-covered pine trees, and just a winter sky. Now, the one thing we do know for sure is that the next reserve will have snow involved in it, and I'm taking that to believe, at least, that this will be Whiterime Ridge 2.0, or Whiterime Ridge in Call of the Wild. Now, another factor that's pushing me towards Whiterime Ridge being the next reserve added here is that in the Hunter Classic, every year they have an annual Halloween event. Now, the Halloween event for 2024 was significantly delayed, having released this month, February of 2025, with Whiterime Ridge being the target reserve for this year's event. Now, this might have no correlation at all, but I'm choosing to believe that it is, and it is really, it's not a coincidence, basically. I'm choosing to believe that this is not a coincidence. This will be the next reserve. This is another small hint towards Whiterime Ridge coming down the road for Call of the Wild. So, a Whiterime Ridge remake, or at the very least a new reserve which is inspired by Whiterime Ridge. I see this being in northern Canada here, as a lot of the species that were on Whiterime Ridge would exist in this northern Canada area. And it wouldn't just bring back this unique icy terrain that we have in the Hunter Classic, but would also introduce some incredible wildlife, new and returning species that I think would be really incredible experience. As for the returning species, what I would see here would be the gray wolf, caribou, the moose, and the plains bison. All of these animals would fit in perfectly, in my opinion, and gray wolves in particular make a lot of sense because we know at some point this year that the gray wolf will be seeing a new fur types added. We don't know how many fur types it'll be, but I think it would make a lot of sense to time up the release of the gray wolf new fur types with the release of this reserve. We're getting a new reserve with gray wolves on it. It kind of just makes a lot of sense to push that out at the same time as that. Now, moose and plains bison were animals from this reserve in the Hunter Classic, so porting them over and just putting them on this map, not even porting them over because they're already in the game, but it would just make a lot of sense. They're already in the game, put them on the reserve. Perfect fit, in my opinion. Lastly, for the returning species, as I mentioned, is caribou. Now, caribou weren't on this reserve in the Hunter Classic, but they fit too perfectly to not have them on this reserve. And another reason why it could be cool to have these added is with all of the reserves that Expansive Worlds has been releasing, in Call of the Wild, we've been seeing a new great one added. Now, I know a lot of people have been asking for a great one of the caribou slash reindeer, as they are the same species. So I think having a new reserve for caribou would be the perfect time to add this new species. Now, I don't know exactly how it would work with caribou and reindeer being the same, how they would really do that. I'm not sure how it would work, but I think this would be a really, really cool time to add that. Just a perfect fit. Now, as for the new species that would be added to this reserve, I have a lot of thoughts on things that would make a good fit in Call of the Wild. And it's going to be a good mix of animals that were on the reserve in the Hunter Classic. And if you're familiar with the Hunter Classic, I will be talking about every single animal that is on the reserve in the Hunter Classic that isn't in the game already. I think all of them would be great fits and should be added to the game eventually. But we also have some that weren't in the reserve and the Hunter Classic that I think would be good fits as well. So starting off, we have the Snowshoe Hare. Snowshoe Hare being from the Hunter Classic. New small species game. It's a rabbit, obviously. And I think it would be pretty unique as to the rabbits and hares that we already have in the game, in the fact that these would mainly be a white fur type species. I don't think we have a single species in the game for rabbits that are mainly white. Now, in real life, snowshoe hares will change their fur type based on what season it is. Now, being with the winter and all the snow, they'll have that white fur. But in the warmer months, when there's not as much snow, there's no snow, they'll get like a sort of grayish brown fur. And I think it would be really cool to see like a mottled fur type or a molting fur type, whatever the correct term there is. I already forgot. But this is really cool seeing kind of like a blend of the white and like the brownish gray. I think would be a really, really cool add for this species. Next up here will be another favorite from the Hunter Classic in the Snow Goose. Now, I know fans of the Hunter Classic were very happy when the magpie geese were added in Call of the Wild with the Emerald Coast. And I think they'd be just as excited, if not more so, for the Snow Goose. Super unique species as far as the geese that we have in the game. Now, we do have the Tundra Bean Goose, which is got the tundra in it. But the Snow Goose, I think, are just so unique with their white feathers. Just super, super cool. And similar to how the Snowshoe Hare have those different fur types, the Snow Goose also has some cool plumage variations. And there's a type of Snow Goose called the Blue Snow Goose. Or maybe just in this Blue Goose. But they look really unique and really incredible. They got a white head, but then that sort of brownish, grayish blue body. And I think those would be very cool to see flying around on this reserve. Next up here, we have what is one of my personal favorites, is the Arctic Fox. Now, something that was kind of funny, I don't play the Hunter Classic often. I'm not very good at the Hunter Classic. I think a lot of it is I don't have the patience to hunt in the Hunter Classic. Even though I do enjoy it, I'm just not very good at the game because I don't have the patience for it. But I say they're one of my personal favorites. But this recording here that I got while I was getting footage from Whiterime Ridge while getting ready for this video, this footage here is the only Arctic fox that I have successfully shot and harvested in the Hunter Classic. My very first one. I was super happy that I was able to get it. Super proud of myself for getting it. But going off of that tangent, I think this is just another animal from Classic that people have been waiting to see for a long time in Call of the Wild. And the fur types, I'm going to go back to that because I love fur types. I think you can see a lot of stuff here with the Arctic fox that would make it a very cool and unique species on this reserve. And just a unique fox species from what we have already, because every other fox species has some sort of, red to it or orange to it. Even the gray fox has like the two tones, which, has that sort of orangey redness to it. Tibetan fox as well. So this would be the first fox in the game that doesn't have orange. Next up here is one of the cooler animals in my opinion, at least that I found while researching what could fit here. Not a returning species from the Hunter Classic, we have the Canada lynx. Now, the Canadian lynx aren't quite as large as the Eurasian lynx that we already have in the game. They'd be more similar in size to the bobcats, but I would say they'd be a lot fluffier, larger hind legs, larger paws in general. A really unique addition here. And they'd be a little more grayish in coloration to the bobcats that we currently have. I also think they'd be slightly larger. Maybe not weight-wise, but at least physically. They'd be a little bit bigger. That's how I see it. But I think these guys would be really cool to have in this game. Right after that, we have what would be another new addition to the Hunter. Not from the Hunter Classic either, but something that I've seen heavily requested by the community just from being around for a while, and that would be the Wolverine. Baby, I'm playing on you. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. That was strange. Moving on. Now, initially this wasn't on my list because, again, it's not an animal that was in the classic version of this reserve. But after looking into it, doing some research, they fit so well geographically here. And as I mentioned, lots of members of the community have been asking for them. I think it would be a really great fit. They've also got some pretty cool different fur variations in real life that I would love to see in the game, because there'd be a lot of uniqueness to even just their common fur types that we can see, and that would be a really cool animal to see. Very unique, and we don't have an animal really like this in the game, and heavily requested. I think this would be a fan favorite if they're added. Next up here, we have two more species returning from the Hunter Classic, being brought over to Call of the Wild, in the Dall Sheep. Very cool and unique sort of sheep species. Very rare. I tried very hard to find a Dall Sheep while I was going through and doing my little recording on the Hunter Classic, but I wasn't able to find one. I didn't spend an incredible amount of time looking for them, but they're very, very unique and cool species. I know a lot of people have been asking. They're probably a species that should have been added when Yukon Valley came out as a reserve. They fit perfectly on a reserve like that, but they just weren't, unfortunately. But it is something that could be corrected by being added to this reserve. Next up, another species actually that would have fit on Yukon Valley is the Sitka deer, as I talked about, two returning species here. These would probably both be Class 4 animals, if I hadn't mentioned that. I think they'd be very cool. Sitka deer are one of my favorites on that reserve in the Hunter Classic. Another sort of, black-tailed deer or mule deer, a little bit smaller in stature, and their antlers are just also, they don't grow as large either. But I think they'd be another really fun and unique species that would be added that could just add a lot of variation to hunting on this reserve. Something that I will also add quickly that I personally hope will happen is a couple of years ago we saw a big backfill of species being added back to other reserves where they would fit. I'm hoping that we might see something like that happening again in the future. Now, a lot of these species, as I'm mentioning, they could be also on Yukon. There's also a couple other reserves that they would fit on throughout, Call of the Wild and all of the species in general. So maybe it's something that we'll see again in another backfill, and I'm hoping that we will at least. And I feel like a lot of the species on this reserve could be added, but also it would be good to have another reserve similar to the Vurhonga Savannah reserve, where a lot of the animals on that are just unique to this one reserve. So who knows how that'll actually go. But that's just another thought I had here while I'm making this video. Now we're moving on to what I like to call the big boys. Now, the next animal, something that I think would be really cool, really awesome, it'd be a Class 8 species, and that is the Muskox. Muskox look incredible. They look amazing. They are such a unique looking animal when you see them. The horns that they have are unlike anything that we have in the game. I think they'd be such an incredible fit to Call of the Wild. And just looking at them, when you look at what this species is, they're basically just massive prehistoric goats that live in the Arctic. Like, I don't know how these were created, but they are terrifying and incredible, and I love them. I think they'd be a great fit for Call of the Wild. Now, next up here is the crown jewel, as you'll probably have seen him in the thumbnail here, but we have the polar bear. Now, these guys are in the Hunter Classic, and they were 100% the main reason that I kept going back to Whiterime Ridge on Classic time and again, just because they were so cool to see. Usually I'd find them just out on the ice on this reserve, and they were such a unique thing to see, and I absolutely love them. If they are to be added to the Hunter Call of the Wild, though, I think they have to be added the right way. Now, similar to how the snow leopard and the Bengal tiger are on Sundarpatan, I think we could kind of see like a cross of that. Now, there'd be probably 10, maybe even less than them on the reserve, just like how there's limited numbers of snow leopards and tigers. And I think they should have heightened senses just like the snow leopards do. But instead of the snow leopards, how they would flee when they've sensed you, the polar bear, just like the Bengal tiger, will actively hunt you and pursue you. That is just such a crazy thing to think about, that we might have this added to the game. And I'm just imagining tracking something through the snowy tundra, and snow starts to fall. Maybe it starts to be like a blizzard, sort of like I mentioned earlier. So your visibility is limited, and you just start to hear the signs that something is around you. Similar to how you'll hear the tigers growl, and you'll hear them sort of walking around you. I'm just imagining something like that, but it's a polar bear, and then suddenly, out of the the icy snow and the white tundra, you just see this massive polar bear coming at you. That gives me chills just thinking about it. I think that is so unique and so cool. I think that'll keep people coming back to a reserve like this in Call of the Wild time and again. That, however, is going to do it for this video. And while I personally hope that a lot of what I said here is coming to the game soon, honestly, I'm just excited to see what actually comes next, because regardless if I'm correct or not, I'm going to love whatever comes next. Let me know what your thoughts are, if you think that this is plausible, if this makes sense at all. Maybe I'm crazy, I don't know. But let me know what you think. I'd really love to know everyone else's thoughts on this as well. And that's going to do it here. So you are now leaving the danger zone, though. So stay safe out there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more content. Bye.